Hello everyone, this is Pal Ponder on Weather. In this update, we're going to be talking about an August cold front with an upcoming cool down that's going to bring some temperatures feeling like fall. So if you do like weather-related content, please subscribe to my channel as I will upload daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. Let's take a look at the teleconnections. We typically don't look at this in the summertime because we're locked and loaded with heat. But we've got some signs of some cooler air on the way. So if we take a look at the latest NAO, which is your North Atlantic Oscillation, you can definitely see it's been predominantly positive for much of August. But by the time we get into that 17th, 18th time frame, that's when it starts to turn negative. And it actually remains negative for the rest of the month. And then we also look at the AO, which is your Arctic Oscillation. Again, it's predominantly positive. It bumps up positive, but again, it shows a little bit more negative bias as we go into that second half of August. So if you take a look at the latest EPO, which is your East Pacific Oscillation, again, you see down here below at the beginning of the month, we had that -3 deviation. That's when we saw some of that cooler conditions in the eastern part of the US, and it's since been well above average. But by the time we get into that 17th 18th time frame again, it shows a little bit of a dip where we bring some cooler conditions back in the picture. It doesn't show nearly as cool as it did at the beginning of the month, but still some cooler conditions on the way. But what got my attention is the western side. So if you take a look at the Pacific North Oscillation, that has been above average. It's been, very hot in the Pacific Northwest, but we are seeing indications that we are starting to see a little bit of a cool down as, again, we go towards that 18th, 19th of the month. But really, what really got my attention is the WPO, which is your West Pacific Oscillation. That actually goes extremely negative by the time we get into that 17th, 18th time frame, and it continues to dive. So that is implying the cold source will impact more of our western based areas and then funnel down into the central and eastern part of the US. So let me kind of take you through the 500 millibar, what it looks like this morning. Yeah, we've got a lot of hot conditions out there currently. We've got heat advisories in place everywhere. It's been really hot. It's the middle of August. The only game in town is underneath this trough all week long that we've had that instability and those strong thunderstorms, and the colder air has been bottled up to the north. But some of that will start to break off and shift a little bit further south as we go through that Sunday, Monday time frame, bringing some cooler conditions with the first week initial cool shot down to the southern regions of more or less in the southern central part of the US into Texas, all the way down to the Louisiana coast with some cooler air and some rainier conditions for that region. But a lot of the colder air is still bottled up to the north, well up in Alaska. But you can start to see pieces of it start to shift down as we get into that Monday time frame. But really, as we get into that Wednesday time frame, but by that 18th, where the WPO went predominantly negative, yeah, we've got a big trough setting up over Idaho and Montana. That's got some colder air associated with it, and it's going to be snowing in parts of Alaska underneath this colder dome. It still predominantly remains warm along the Pacific Northwest, along the coastal communities. A lot of this colder air will be more or less into the interior sections of Idaho, Montana, and getting into Wyoming, as the ridge is still predominant for much of the Northeast, with still some of that cooler air for the South, but it's starting to shift back up to a warm front. But by the time we get back into Saturday again, that colder push will just expand. Obviously, it'll modify as it shifts further south. But we've got some more colder air, cooler air for August standards, filtering in as we go into next weekend. So let me take a look at the snow. I mean, here's the snow outlook for the next 10 days. You can definitely see a lot of the snow is obviously well bottled up well to the north, but we are starting to see signs of some snow flying under that cold dome in Alaska, in our northern regions as well as our southern regions. that is going to be breaking off and sending pulses of that colder air down to the south. And that's the part that's going to be impacting parts of Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming with some of that cooler conditions as we go through time. So let me take a look at the temperature anomalies and how all this is going to play out. Here's that first initial cooler blast. Today's Friday, so that cooler blast is going to be setting up shop over Ohio, and then it filters into the south and all the way down to the south. So the next, as we get into Monday, a lot of the cooler conditions are going to be felt along Texas, all the way in the southeast coast, with all the instability and all the cloud cover and a lot of the rain around. That's what's going to keep temperatures down, 5 to 10 degrees below average. But all the hotter air is still going to be predominantly under the Pacific Northwest, well to the north, as we got that second colder push gaining strength as we get into the day on Monday. Then as we go into that Wednesday time frame, when that WPO goes negative, strongly negative, yeah, we've got some definitely colder air, if not fall-like temperatures, going to be happening in parts of Idaho, parts of Montana. These are places that have seen triple digits as of late. So this is going to be a colder shock, a cooler shot of, again, 20 to 25 degrees below average temperatures at times, with some of that colder push really setting up. And you can see where some of the cooler air is along where the monsoon is going to be continue to remain active. So where you're cloudy and where you're rainy, that's where the colder air is going to fly. And there's that colder push as we go through that Wednesday time frame. That'll be sending pulses of cooler air. By the time we get into Thursday, yeah, that kind of shifts over to the Dakotas. So now we're talking those 10 to 15 degree below average anomalies going to be setting up over parts of the Dakotas. So this is going to be a definitely welcome relief. It's not cold, obviously it's August, but it's definitely a cool down. It's not the triple digits, and it's not the heat advisory we've been dealing with for predominantly much of August. So this is definitely a welcome sign that at least some fall-like temperatures are starting to show up and starting to come up, and that's going to be on the table, at least as we go in the second half of August. So yes, there's that colder push setting up over much of the Dakotas into Wyoming, starting to filter into Nebraska. You can see that's this Thursday time frame. That this would be August 19th, because 00 is August 19th, about 7 o'clock. Yeah, we start to have that south wind trying to rebound some of these temperatures in the south. But man, that colder dome will just start to really take effect and push further south as we go through next weekend. So by the time we get into the next weekend, yes, the ridge stays predominantly for much of the Pacific Northwest. Sorry guys, you stay warm, dry. Sorry, I can't bring colder air to you. But that western PO, that west-based PO, sets up shop over the central part of the U.S. and brings that colder conditions down all the way to the south. So this is a reinforcing shot. So yeah, you get below average temperatures and start to be in Oklahoma, today, tomorrow, and then you try to start to rebound. But as soon as you start to try to rebound, boom, you get hit again with another cool shot coming in well down to the south, with some much cooler conditions affecting a much bigger part of the country. But the ridge is still going to be predominantly over the Pacific Northwest and over the Northeast again, with a lot of the colder dome over the central part over the U.S. So if we take a look and kind of break it out over 5-day increments, here is the average anomalies between now and Tuesday. So between Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Tuesday time frame. Yes, we've got the dominating ridge of high pressure over the Pacific Northwest. The ridge stays well to the north. We've got that first initial cool shot with the monsoon flow for much of Arizona, much of New Mexico, into Texas. There's a lot of instability here with that first cooler shot. So you're going to have isolated, scattered rain showers around in much of the Ohio Valley. This is one of the reasons why it's going to keep the cooler conditions at bay for this neck of the woods over the next 5 days, as the colder air builds up in Alaska. So the next 5 days, as that colder push starts to push further down, this is between that 18th and that 22nd time frame. Yes, it stays warm along the Pacific Northwest, along the coastal regions. The colder push will be more or less in the interior regions of Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, getting into South Dakota and to parts of Nebraska as well. And then that second colder push that has that instability with just that rain showers, with the hurricanes coming close, with Fred and then potentially Grace coming closer as well. By then we have all that cooler conditions down to the south and the southeast, again, as the ridge dominates the northeast as well as the Pacific Northwest. And then the next 5 days kind of implies the same thing. The ridge stays locked and loaded over much of the Pacific Northwest. We start to modify by then into parts of Montana, the Dakotas, with those fall-like temperatures going away. So those last about 5 days, but down to the south, that colder push continues to remain locked and loaded down further to the south, where again, we've got all that instability from the tropics and from just more of an unsettled weather pattern down here in the south and the southeast. That's where predominantly the cooler conditions, the below average anomaly conditions, are going to be lying between the 22nd and the 27th time frame. So yeah, that's the same reason why the Climate Prediction Center has highlighted in their 3 to 4 week outlook, by the time we get in that 21st time frame and the September 3rd time frame, yeah, we have a lot of the cooler conditions, the below average conditions, well to the south of Texas and parts of the southeast and the Florida, where we have those above average anomalies into parts of much of the north. And that's the reason why I do feel the tropics are going to be so active as well. So this is a prime type setup for an active second half of August, and yes, implying that the monsoon comes back. And then we also have the flow of above average precipitation more or less along the coastal regions, with those instability of those invest or hurricanes or tropical systems coming closer to shore for parts of the south in the southeast. And even the same thing if we take a look at the latest European precipitation anomaly guidance. These are what you would normally get for the next 10 days. So anywhere in the blue shaded area is well above average normal rainfall. So yes, it has a lot of the rain predominantly for much of the south and the southeast, as we stay dry for much of the Pacific Northwest, and then subtle hints with that cooler shot bringing some rainier conditions along the way. But those blue shaded areas, especially as you get into parts of New Mexico, with that flow from Kevin and Linda from the Pacific as well, keeps the monsoon alive for those regions. And then the flow down here from Fred and potentially Grace keeps the well above average precipitation anomalies for much of the south and the southeast. So I do expect a lot of rain coming up in this neck of the woods as we go through the second half of August. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video and definitely leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.